Welcome to Shadowy Spectrums. I'm your host, Peter Shelley. The focus of this show will be UFOs and other fantastic mysteries. Tonight, it's really an honor, special honor for me to interview GEORGE Fedorovsky. George is a paranormal investigator. He is the head of Moscow's Poltergeist Research Group, one of the heads, NOZP, as it is known, head of the Russian Society for Anomalous Research Preservation, and he's also an expert for the Commission on Miraculous Phenomena of the Russian Orthodox Church. I want to give a special thanks to Klaus Van of Sweden. He is the responsible for putting me in contact with George. I really appreciate that. And this is also exciting because this will be the first time George has given an English language video interview. And the information that we're going to be talking about tonight about anomalous research in the USSR is pretty much unknown to English-speaking audiences. So we're going to hopefully learn a lot of new things. George will give us some background on anomalous research in the USSR. And we're going to be talking about some really impressive cases that he has selected to discuss. So at this point, I'd like to welcome George. Good evening, George. How are you?
Hi, Peter. I'm doing fine today. Hope you're doing good too. We're trying to, we've been trying to record this interview for almost 2 years, I believe.
Yeah, well, yes, it's been a long time, but why don't, is there anything you want to add to my introduction about your background?
I think it's as much as needed. I can just say what right now we keep trying to research poltergeist cases. Like quick response group, kind of like this. So we're trying to communicate with people over Russia and neighboring countries about all these kinds of phenomena. They call us, witnesses call us when they have some kind of poltergeist, some kind of activity, and we try to keep it to keep this connection running, because it's getting complicated, especially that everything going on in post-Soviet space right now. Yeah, that's basically it. And we're trying to do as many research investigations as we can, but well, today we mostly doing archive job. We're doing mostly some kind of history research and everything else, but we still trying to keep up with the quick response poltergeist research. But it's getting more and more complicated with each year.
Well, why don't we start, if we can, with your information on the background of anomalous research in the USSR. You have a lot of interesting information and photos of some of the investigators. In the early history. Now we're going back to what time period are we going to start with?
We're going to start with 1991. We're going to start with 1991. I'm going to I'm gonna open pictures right now. So here it is. Here's pictures. Here's the presentation. And it's just a small illustration of the poltergeist activity. It's from some of the many Soviet magazines and Soviet newspapers what we're collecting right now. And here just, like a small demonstration of what kind of things going on in the poltergeist activity. Yeah.
Okay.
And we're gonna start with, as I said, the 1981. We're gonna start with the poltergeist case in Kursk. So it's the oldest investigated poltergeist case, officially investigated, and as we know it, it's investigated by many Soviet officials. At that time, at 1981, they didn't have, like a poltergeist research commission or anything like this. They had some organizations to investigate this kind of phenomena, to investigate all kinds of UFO phenomena and poltergeist phenomena and parapsychology phenomena, but they, I believe, they didn't have good enough information connection. Like these organizations, they didn't really get information from all the cases what was going on around the Soviet Union. So this case investigated at the time when this phenomena was active in 1981. This case was investigated only by KGB and local police. I will call it police, even for in Soviet times it was called militia. So for it to be for like not to making things as complicated as they are, I'm gonna call it police. But
Okay.
what you need to understand is it's not exactly police.
Now, excuse me, we're talking about the Kursk Voice Poltergeist case.
Yeah,
correct.
Kursk Voice Poltergeist. Yeah, but first, before we're gonna talk about Kursk Voice Poltergeist, I want to introduce the main Soviet investigators. The main Soviet researchers. So this is Valentin Fomenko. So Mr. Fomenko, or should I say Dr. Fomenko, he was basically one of the main anomalous researchers in Soviet times. He was involved into, let's say, space science back in his days. He was investigating you know, like then a rocket flies and it crashes somehow because of some reasons, or you know, because it's blown up. He's supposed to investigate the crash. He's supposed to investigate why does it happen. And later in the late 1970s, he was invited by his friend, his colleague Ziegel, Felix Ziegel, to continue investigations of UFO phenomena in the research program Setka. So Setka, it means web in English. Setka is quite huge, basically mostly UFO research program. It was involving the whole Soviet Union and many countries and territories, what was included in Soviet Union. And Setka was running since 1978, I believe, till the 1992 or 1991. So the collapse of the Soviet Union, it also ended. And he was one of the people who was in charge for UFO phenomena in Setka. But in the 80s, he, well, we're going to discuss it later. He, you know, he became interested in poltergeists, very interested in poltergeist phenomena and parapsychology phenomena as well. He died in 2006 or 2005, I believe, or even earlier. So sadly, many questions remains. Yeah, and let's move on to another fellow investigator. This is Igor Vinokurov. He was a biologist at Moscow, at one of the Moscow universities. I think at Moscow State University, but I may be mistaken. If it's very interesting for you, you can always contact me to make any questions. And Vinokurov, he was basically one of the, let's say, fathers of Soviet parapsychology and Soviet anomalous research. You know, like the part, the public part of it. You know, like not the closed part, not the special forces part, but the part where you can actually publish something, and you know, like more like citizen science. You know, like citizen science, and yeah, he was deeply involved in parapsychology, and later he got involved in poltergeist research as well. And this is, but talking about Vinokurov, he was also involved in many research projects, in many research programs, what was running back in the days. So he started to publish things as early as possible. You know, like you can find his articles in 70s, in 80s, but his main books and his main articles and TV appearances, they started to came up in the 90s after the collapse of the Soviet Union. So later we're going to Anatoliy Kartashkin, who's also, all of them PhDs, all of them you can call doctors if it's appropriate. But they all technicians, they all physicians. So and biologist is more like exception. So Anatoly Kartashkin, he's one of the founders of the Moscow Magician Club.
Mm-hmm.
He was one of the main magicians in this in Soviet field, in Soviet times, and later in Russia. And this organization, this club, they founded with his colleagues. It remains as the main organization for the magicians, for the Russian magicians. And he, in the late 80s, in the very late 80s, in 1989 or 1988, something around there, he started to be interested in parapsychology and in poltergeist research. As the most interesting for him. And he did a lot of job in this field. The first book completely dedicated to poltergeist research in Russia. He wrote it and published it in 1997. And I need to mention what in 80s and in 90s, they already had a lot of, sometimes even books dedicated to poltergeist phenomena in Russia, but they never had it officially published. They always had it what's called samizdat. So samizdat is basically you're not allowed to publish the book you're not allowed by the censorship to publish it. So you have to print it yourself. And if you're able to make some copies, you're making some copies, and people who interested in the book, they making some copies too. So basically it's a self-published book, if speaking simply. It's a self-published book in the times of censorship, and you can face some problems if afterwards is going to find out about some activities like this. And as I said, I got to mention there was books completely dedicated to poltergeist in Russia, in Soviet Union, but it wasn't official books. And he was basically the first to write official published book about poltergeist research in Soviet Union and in Russia.
Some more underground, in English you would say underground publications.
Yeah, underground publications, underground books, they existed before, but this one is the first official one. Officially published, and there was no censorship at the time. You were allowed to publish things like this. And later, a around the same time, they started to publish books about these things as well. And in his book, he mostly talks about, as I said, poltergeists. He mentions all kinds of other anomalous research, like all kinds of other research involving paranormal phenomena. And he was investigating poltergeist for around 10 years. So he spent around 10 years investigating them. And it was some of the most famous Moscow poltergeists. He was same as the previous researchers. He was located in Moscow. Yeah, and he was investigating all these things back in the days together with them.
Is he still alive?
Yeah, he's the one of them who's still alive. Yeah, he's the one of them who's still alive. Yeah, he's yeah, and this is I wanted to mention these other fellows. As I said, it's Nikolai Novgorodov. So Novgorodov, he's from Siberia. He's the only one from there who I'm gonna mention today. But I can't not mention him. I can't not mention him. I got to do it because he's one of the main Soviet and later Russian investigators of this field of the poltergeist phenomena, and I think we're not gonna talk a lot about him today. I just want to give him a mention because it's important to know. He wrote a book also in 1993, and it was only published last year, so he wasn't able to publish it for many years. Only last year he managed to publish it with my help. He's still alive, but as I said, from the Moscow poltergeist researchers, there's like several people who still with us. And in Siberia, they had a huge program, a huge government program to investigate all kinds of all kinds of phenomena, all kinds of paranormal phenomena, anomalous phenomena. I think we can get to this topic next time. And the last but not least, it's Felix Ziegel. Felix Ziegel, I think many people knows him. I believe so. So he's most famous as ufologist, as basically one of the first Soviet ufologists, and he was involved in the same as the previous people. He was involved in many research, in many official research of all kinds of paranormal topics. And in 1992, he got information about poltergeist activity in Moscow. The same, he's also from Moscow. He got information about poltergeist activity, and he called other people who he knew. He called for Fomenko and Vinokurov with him to go with him to investigate this case. So they were investigating it together as three of them. So I think I'm not gonna stay on this topic for very long because, well, mainly Felix Ziegel, he was mainly ufologist. So I think people know about him pretty well already, but I will say what he was a how you say it,
Pioneer.
you know, well, yeah, but he was a scientist at Moscow Aviation Institute, and it was the base for the first official group of enthusiasts for UFO phenomena. Well, one of the first, of course, one of the first. So it was an important part of ufology history and in Russia, in Soviet Union as well. So going on next, we have what I said earlier. It's a poltergeist in Kursk. So poltergeist in Kursk is it's 1981. It's 1981, and poltergeist in Kursk. Kursk is a city on south of Russia, and it's not biggest. It's not like the biggest one. There's much bigger cities around this region, but it's an important city. And back in the days, in 1991, they had, let's say, there was a family, like not just a family, it's something what called коммуналка. So коммуналка, like коммунальная квартира.
Excuse me, we're talking 1981, aren't we?
Yeah,
1981.
Yeah, 1981. And they had, like co-living, what it's called in English, I believe. You suppose it's basically it's an apartment shared between many different people, many different strangers, and that was one of the main idea in Soviet social social structure or something like this. Yeah. So and people were living together, like almost completely randomly, and they started to have this phenomena. They started to have this voice appearing out of nowhere, and it's quite a complicated story, as all the poltergeist cases are quite complicated, and people were arguing about what was causing this activity. And well, I can say what I spoke with the guy who was a police officer back in the days, back in 1981, and he was one of the police officers who was involved in in security of this house, because this voice poltergeist, it was so popular, so it was such a huge sensation for Soviet people, what they all gathered around this small street. And there was he told me what there was almost like 1,000 of people from all around the Soviet Union. They were coming to see this, to hear this voice. And he was one of the people who was involved in making sure what security is okay in this house. And he wasn't allowed to ask any questions. He wasn't allowed to try to investigate it himself. But he was able just to stand there. He in his time spent there, he didn't hurt anything. That's what I got to say right now. He didn't had an opportunity to talk to the people who live there while he was on the duty. He was only able to do it later, when he got involved in paranormal research as a retired police officer. And he was managed to get to talk to many people. He managed to talk to many people involved in this case, and even with the people who was the main investigators, police investigators, because there was basically two investigations going on. So one was from KGB and another from police. And that was the point. And somehow we know what later KGB was involving parapsychologists on these kind of cases. And at example, Fomenko, he was involved as well. From KGB called him on some cases. But this case, as I said earlier, they didn't really call any specialists in this kind of phenomena. At least we don't know about it. We don't know about it. But already later, in many years after this case ended, they started to like parapsychologists and all kinds of phenomena researchers. They started to try to research it, to investigate this case, but it was already kind of late, I would say, because many people already died at that times. So first investigation of this case was conducted by journalists 10 years later, and there was another research conducted by Vasily Kosinov, who I know personally, who I mentioned. He's the retired police officer. He conducted his investigation already in early early 2000s, like around 2002, 2001, something like this. And he published his results of his investigation in his own book. He wrote a book later, and he concluded what it's in his research. He concludes what it's a real, actual poltergeist. And I visited Kursk. I visited the town of Kursk later last year. No, not last year. In 2021, I was able to visit Kursk in 2021. I spoke with some people who actually was the neighbors of this house, you know.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and they said what they heard. They heard this voice. They heard this voice. It doesn't really. So, what I can say, if there's a voice, you want to ask this voice, like, who are you, or some questions like this. This is the questions what appear first in most people's minds. But I would say what it's not the same in Soviet and in Russian tradition, especially, you know, because, well, first of all, if we're talking from the point of Russian Orthodox Church, and from any Orthodox Church, you know, from any Slavic Orthodox Church, let's say like this, or Eastern Orthodox Church, you know, Christian, they not allowing, they think about it as a sin, not officially, but, well, they say about it in many of their papers. They say what we not allow our people to get involved in any of these superstitions, as they see it. They see these things as superstitions. They all the you know, like psychics, poltergeists, UFO. They all of this for Orthodox churches mostly superstitions. We can talk about it later, but right now I can just mention it slightly. So
Now, excuse me.
Yeah. Okay.
Now, when you talk to the neighbors, because this voice, the audience doesn't know what we're talking about. So this voice sounds, you know, kind of mysterious. Well, it is mysterious. It was mysterious. What did the neighbors say about the voice in terms of what it was saying? And what was the sound quality of this voice? Was it just like a normal person talking, or did it sound like it was on a loudspeaker? What was the sound quality?
I got you. Yeah, I got the question. The thing is the sound was loud and clear. So the sound was loud and clear. It didn't sounded like a recording at all. At least for the people who I spoke to. I spoke with only one person who heard this voice. And in his opinion, this voice sounded like a famous artist, famous musician at the times. Vysotsky, maybe some people who interested in Soviet history and in Soviet culture, maybe they heard this name before. So, you know, like a loud and very, you know, like you have a flu or something voice. This kind of voice, you know, like a little bit cracked voice. But it was very very good quality of voice. That's what I can say from the from my view, at least from my point of view. Let's say like this, because as I said again, as I said earlier, I managed to find only one person who heard this voice. I believe if I was spent a little bit more time there, I would be able to find more people who heard it. But I was managed to find only one guy, and yeah, it was sounding like a. It was sound like it was sound nothing like a Soviet speaker, let's say like this, like Soviet technology, you know, like, because if you have any piece of old recording, or old recorders, old players, you can try to imagine, like, you can take the Western one and imagine the sound quality, you know, like twice worse, something something like this.
Well, did the voice,
yeah.
excuse me, did the voice have a, excuse me, quality like it was amplified electronically?
No, I think no. If we're talking from the witnesses' descriptions, what you can read in the books and in the articles, well, again, it was a long time ago, and it's very hard to really say for today. But I always look at other point of view, you know, like the sound of voice, how it's sounding, it's very different for people's ears, you know, like you and I, we can both hear one recording, and I can say what it's good, and you will say what it's bad sounds, you know. It's very, it's not something what you need to let's say pay a lot attention, because many things can produce different sounds, you know, like, and even in the 1981, even in Soviet times of 1981, even back in the days, you could be able to produce some kind of quality sound, I believe. If you know how to do it, I believe you would be able to do it. You know, that's just my opinion. But if you want to, if you really have a point to do it, I think you will be able to achieve a good result. But what I'm trying to say is another thing. I'm trying to say, if we're gonna look at the description of activity of this poltergeist, and I'm not talking about, you know, like physical activity, like flying things and other stuff. I'm talking about what was the voice acting like. So imagine a group of KGB agents gathered around this house. They and police around this house. They all try to get the source of the sound. And what I have read about it, they've been running around the house, and they've been this voice was jumping from the different angles, from the different spots of the house. Around the house, it was flying around there. They was running around trying to find the source of it. And at some point, this voice from the house, it jumps on the street in the bushes, and they all run around. They all run to the bushes. They try to find someone that, let's say, player or something like this. and they couldn't. They the point is they couldn't catch this person, like for the hand. The only way they could do it, they needed to close this case, as I was explained by this fellow Vasily Kosinov, who was investigating this case as a retired police officer. He told me what they needed to close this case, and they make one of the local women came with confession. One of the people who lived there.
Before we get into that, maybe I could just read some examples I have of what people report about this voice. One of the in this material, it describes a early incident inside of a house in the kitchen. The grandmother is preparing pancakes.
Yeah.
And it says, once the hostess was frying pancakes for dinner, suddenly at the very moment she was removing a rosy brown pancake from the pan, a deep male voice rang out, "What, Grandma? Are you frying pancakes? Treat me a little." And then there was some obscenity. And of course, the old woman was frightened, and she apparently searched the house, the rooms, checked everything, and couldn't detect any intruder. And then the voice boomed again. "What the F did you find? Look at your place."
Yeah.
So that was one of the early incidents.
This voice always swears. And I need to mention what all the poltergeists' voices, what we deal with in our cases, like in Soviet cases, they all swears a lot. All the poltergeists, they all, if they go in the voice contact with people, they all use very heavy language. That's what I need to mention. So it's not an exception. That's what I'm trying to say.
Well, let me give a couple of more examples so people can get a flavor of what kind of incidents were happening with this voice. So the grandma goes to the police and convinces them to come to her house. And while the police are at the house, the voice says something like, "What are you filthy cops? What have you come here to do? Catch me or drink beer?" Then more obscenities. And of course, the police are amazed and they search everything. They even dig up the garden, the whole vegetable garden, searching for some kind of stereo transmitting equipment. And then the KGB got involved with powerful equipment trying to detect the source of this voice. Like you say, the voice seemed to have the power to materialize anywhere in the area. And it didn't seem to be coming from a single source. And the voice seemed to be aware of everything that people were doing. It had all kinds of private information about them. And in a later point, one of the witnesses got a tape recorder and brought it into the house kind of secretly, brought this tape recorder into the house this was a Daria Petrovna, and she brought it into the house in the dark. She packed it in a cardboard box. However, the voice instantly informed her what she had bought, why, and even named the brand of the tape recorder.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
things like this kept on happening. But now this voice, now one theory is that it was some kind of recording, but apparently this voice was interactive.
It is, yeah.
Yeah,
it
and
is.
it had a dialogue with the victims.
Yeah, yeah.
Which contradicts the idea that it could have been just a recording. Anyway,
Yeah,
those are some examples.
That's basically the main points for the paranormal explanation.
And let me just add, there are a couple of other examples. At one point, the voice predicted that one of the people would die that year, and it actually happened.
These were the women, the old women. Yeah.
And it was mainly personal insults. This voice was giving all the time, but it also made insulting political remarks, like
political statements. Yeah, he was making some political
down with Soviet power. Long live Pinochet.
Yeah.
Who was in Chile. What did that have to do with the Soviet Union, right?
I mean, it's
long live fascism. I mean, political insults also. And another example, like in the middle of the night, someone's sleeping, and the voice would scream in the middle of the night, blah blah blah. Get up. Why are you sleeping? So at any time, this voice could suddenly manifest and insult you.
Yeah, it is. But what you need to understand about poltergeist, it's a very social phenomena. So this phenomena, as it, you know, like, if you, how to say it, it's a very social phenomena. It uses the most popular topics at the time. So the political topics, they always. I had a poltergeist voice case, audio poltergeist, let's say like this, and he was also talking a lot about, you know, all these political things like Stalin and everything else, like Soviets and modern politics, and that's one of the main characters of the let's say this part of world, of the voice poltergeist, which appears in this part of world in Russia, in Soviet Union.
Well, let me just add
Excuse
me. Let me just add another example here. Somebody is in a house. Okay, as soon as someone sits down, the voice yells, "Why are you seated?" And is it worth getting up? Why did you get up? Go somewhere. Why did you go? So you can see this would drive the people crazy.
It is,
these insults.
And that's why.
What did you come for?
Yeah. That's why we get into the one of the main poltergeist explanation in Soviet days. Well, let's say it's not only Soviet days. It's pretty much many countries, many people in many countries believes in it. what poltergeist is some kind of weapon, some kind of psychotronic weapon, what could be used by, let's say, governments against the people, some very specific people. They what they chosen, I don't know, randomly or not. I never, let's say, I never took. I never took a deep dive in this idea, but it's very clearly says what it's produced. Well, basically, what it's like a technical production. Some kind of human technologies used by some people. Simply saying, let's say simply saying like this. Yeah. So
Well, in the you started to talk about this. There's some information that appeared in Pravda, the Kurskia Pravda.
Yeah.
And indicating that this
Yes,
whole voice phenomena was the product of an old woman with a cassette recorder in her bag, a grandma with a cassette recorder. You want to comment about that?
Yeah, that's basically there was what happened. Okay. So basically the idea is
An old woman had a recorder.
Yeah. The idea is in newspapers, several explanation appeared, which includes like technologies, some human technologies basically, and this is one of them. What is a hoax from the people who live in this building, in this house, and it's a very weird decision to make hoax like this in times like that, because in 1981 for something like this you can get either in prison or in psychiatric hospital, and the question is which is worse, because some people would say what psychiatric would be worse in this time period, because they would try to fight your ideas if they're gonna be told to to fight them. So I really I can say like this. I'm not denying what it could be, some kind of a hoax, some kind of a fake produced show by the people who live there. But I will say what I highly doubt it, because I would say even if it was a hoax, even if it was a like a fake poltergeist, I would say what it was probably like some other people, like maybe some, I don't know, because they do had some programs what was involved in driving mass hysteria. They were trying to produce phenomena like this, like some government agencies, as you call them, they always they had such ideas. And maybe it was just one of the projects. I mean, who knows? Right now, it's very hard to say, but I can't blame these people who was living there. I don't think it was their fault. Let's say like this. That's my opinion. I can't blame them. I can't blame them.
Well, the information I have says that this woman, this grandma, was accused of what they term malicious hooliganism, and
Yeah.
she had to go to court, and she was sentenced to compulsory mental treatment.
That's what
In
I'm saying. Yeah.
consequence, I mean, it's just amazing that anyone could believe an old grandma's going around the neighborhood playing a tape recorder and as a prank. I mean, that's pretty outrageous.
Yeah, it is, and they never said why was she doing this, and she never had any kind of problems before like this. You know, she never appeared to be some crazy person, and
But
it
then,
just doesn't make up really sense.
Yeah, the whole thing is, to me, hilarious from my perspective. And then the focus went from the grandma to another person. This grandma, this pensioner, Daria Petrovna Smirnova. You could pronounce it better, I'm sure.
Yep.
She lived with a young girl named Lena, who was a lodger, who was a student at one of the Kursk schools. And then the focus shifted to her as the possible source of the voice. Can you talk about that?
I can talk about that, and what I can say is Vasily Kosinov, who I mentioned before. He was able to contact her. He was able to find her.
Really,
and
Lena?
He found her. Yeah, he found her. But she's Lena. You know, like Yelena, Helen. It's short for Helen. Lena. It's not Lena, it's Lena. So he managed to find her, and he spoke with her a little. And as I said earlier, she didn't have any reasons to do this thing. She never got anything from it. She never come out publicly. So, and what I need to say is her name, Lena, it's a fake name. So it's not her real name. That's the name what they all the people around this case agreed to use when they mention her. So she's completely anonymous, and that's it. I mean, who in the right mind would be willing to mess with both the police and KGB when they surrounded your house and they have all the rights to do anything to you, basically. And they did. These old women, they put her in a mental hospital, and for basically, I mean, for
Malicious
I can't
hooliganism.
say. Yeah.
That's hysterical.
I can't really say for no reason, because the court said, well, they have reasons. But Vasily Kosinov, as I mentioned before, he's a retired policeman. He have a right to look at the case at the archives of police, and they don't have proofs of this. They don't have proofs of this. They just did it to close this case finally, because
But-
as I said earlier, wait a second, because as I said earlier, it was a huge sensation. It was driving people to this place, and they were. It was a big problem for government, for local government.
And why don't you share what the concept was, why they accuse Lena?
Elena, yeah.
Yeah, it was the concept was as ridiculous as the grandma concept. It was the idea that she was some kind of a super ventriloquist.
Yeah, that was the idea. That was basically the idea. And, I mean, again, it's, well, I would say it's probably impossible to do something like this without some kind of technologies. So you need to have like a small speakers all around the house. And as someone who managed to use any kind of simple electromagnetic field detection, these kind of speakers, you know, like the old ones from 1981, you would find them easily. That even the simple, the very simple radio receiver, you know, like that any kind of you know, like you can go buy it anywhere, this kind of receiver, and you would be able to find it. And they say all these articles and all these stories, all these books, they say what the KGB, they did some good equipment, good for the times, of course. They were trying to find any kind of equipment, and they never did. They never found anything. So how would they explain voice outside, what it was appearing outside of the house, and it was appearing in different rooms? I mean, I can understand if it was just in one room, let's say, or in couple rooms, okay, but we're talking about outside. I don't see how it works. And another thing is, as you mentioned yourself earlier, this case, this voice, it was very good informed. This voice was very good informed about what's going on. That people, this voice knew a lot of details, personal details of even police and KGB officers. So I really highly doubt it. What it's her, it's her fault, or this other woman fault.
And
I don't think it's any of the people who was living there.
And there's some examples of the voice insulting Lena. Also, she's preparing some food, and the voice was heard to say, "Kazakh woman, I don't need your dumplings."
Yeah.
And apparently, Kazakh is a reference to the ethnic group of her husband. She married and then the voice also insulted her for that, saying that insulted her for marrying a foreigner, and at the end called her a Kazakh. And but then other people said that the insults from the voice were that she did that just to cover that she was doing the voices.
Yeah, it's not a big deal if you're talking, if you're looking at this from the point of hoax. I mean, from the point of hoax, I don't see any problems with it. I mean, she can insult herself as much as she needs to done something. But again, there was no reason for her or anyone to do something like this. I mean, it's not like I don't know, United States. It's not United States where you can, like make a poltergeist hoax and write a book about it after it. It's not this kind of thing. I mean, in United States scenario, we can see the reason to do it, and in Soviet scenario, in Soviet space, personally, I don't see the reason for people to do it in this specific time period, because what you need to understand, it's 1981. It's not middle of 80s, because the perestroika hasn't it not started yet. It's 1981. It's not started yet. It's only no one saying about it at the time. It's still
Still a lot of restrictions.
Still a lot of restrictions. Yeah, that's the point. So you're not allowed to do a lot of things still.
But let me just add one more example of the insults. The voice, we hear the voice screaming, "I will hang the Ivanovs by the legs. I will slaughter Nikolai. Don't look for me, people. You won't catch me anyway." But your friend who interviewed this woman, this Lena, the pseudonym, what did Lena have to say about the voice? What did she say?
That's a good question. I remember just the fact what he found her, and he spoke with her. He got some information what he wasn't let's say involved in it financially, or with any kind of reasons you can imagine. I just think she wanted to be she wanted, just a very simple life. I remember from his contact with her. I remember what she moved at some village, like she moved from town to some village. So it was very complicated for him to find her. That was the main idea. And the fact that he managed to find her, it's and what she was still at this place, because he's been asking people around, and some people gave him the address and her contacts, and he was and the fact that she was still in the village at somewhere, even almost 20 years later, or even more. I mean, it says something. I mean, I don't see her fault. That's all. And what was she thinking about voice? I mean, the same as everybody. What I was trying to say at the very start of our conversation about, Russian Orthodox Church and Russian Soviet beliefs about all these kind of things. Well, first of all, it's Russian Orthodox Church who says it's superstitions, and another thing is common Slavic beliefs. Like what's around this area. So they believe what it's, like a home spirit. They believe what is some kind of home spirit. They have a special word for it, domovoy. So domovoy, they believe what it's some kind of a home spirit, and that was the thing most of the people thought it is.
What
Most
is
of the
your-
people thought what it's a home spirit.
What is
And
your
they
opinion?
never, they never really, what I was trying to say at the very beginning, nobody really paid, attention if it's something supernatural, like some spirit or aliens or something else. Nobody really tried to get into details, like into names or something like this, into some categories. Nobody tried to understand if it's like a ghost or something like this. It wasn't. It was too much of stress for the locals to try to figure out what they dealing with. So they almost immediately they called the police. And it's not just the police, they called the local administration, let's say like this. They called the local government of the town. And they called the KGB later, local government called the KGB, local government asked for police to start to investigate this case more, more, and that was that's what I'm trying to say. What nobody really at that while the poltergeist was active, nobody really treated it like paranormal phenomena. Nobody really treated it like paranormal phenomena. What I was trying to say, they never called any parapsychologists or paranormal researchers or ufologists. They never called anyone who specializes in these kind of things. You know what I'm saying? And it was just police and KGB and local government, and they just were trying to find it as a hoax. They was just working with it as a hoax.
Now, excuse me, was there any legal consequences for Lena? Did they arrest her, or what happened? Do we know?
At the end of the day, right now, today, it doesn't matter. Because first of all, I think they never gave a real reason to any of the people who were involved in this case. They didn't put her in jail. They probably had a very good talk with her because and since she's young and they have like an older person, they decided to put how to say it, to let the dogs out for the older person, and they put her in mental hospital for some time, and that's basically it. That's the interesting thing is what I thinking is the interesting thing is what it's all happened. It's not this case specifically. If it was happening somewhere, where the paranormal is more, let's say, popular and more and more and happens more, like Britain or again United States, I think it would be it probably wouldn't be it wouldn't drive so much attention to itself if it wasn't in Soviet time, in Soviet household. I also have another picture. What I want to show, it's a picture of the house where all these things was going on.
In
Here
Kursk.
it is. Yeah, in Kursk. Yeah, These houses behind it, these big blocks, they appeared later, years later already. So it was more all this area of this town. It was more like closer to the village kind of area. So yeah, that was the case, the Voice Poltergeist case in Kursk in 1981. Eventually, what I can say what it's the most interesting part about this case. What it's we have some data about it. We know clearly. We know what it was investigated by KGB and police and local authorities. So it's a pretty remarkable for the Soviet history, of paranormal research. Many people heard this voice, and sadly, most of them already passed. So, yeah, that's basically it. We can probably move to the next case. It would be 1982.
And why don't you tell us the name of this case?
So this picture, another picture, it's Vasily Kosinov. I'm sorry, it's from the previous case. From the previous case, there's a picture I took of him in 2021. Yeah, he's right now, as I said, he's a retired police officer and poet and writer. He doing a lot of books and all kinds of these things. But he used to.
Excuse me, he was involved with this case. He was.
Yeah, he was involved in investigation. Yeah, he was involved in investigation of this case. He found this girl, who were accused as someone. Well, yeah, it will. He did a great job, in my opinion, of investigating all these kinds of phenomena. And they had a lot of phenomena back in Kursk, back in his days. They had a lot of kinds of things he later investigated already when he retired. He investigated, UFOs, crop circles, all kinds of mysteries and everything else. He and some of his colleagues, they had a group of people who was investigating paranormal phenomena. Well, it's completely different story eventually. So we will move to next case. This is a plan of apartments of poltergeist case, another poltergeist case. This case is based in Moscow. This case is happening in Moscow in 1982, so it's next year after the previous case. So this case already, it's let's say more closer to a classic poltergeist, what you may say, when we talk about flying objects and destroyed furniture. It involves some interesting, unusual parts. Let's say, maybe you could say us about them, the parts, the unusual parts of this case, like Men in Black and everything else.
Yeah, one of the unusual elements is a apparently some kind of a men in black that appears early in the sequence of events. Now, if my understanding, excuse me,
Yeah,
is this taking place at a apartment complex?
it
Or
is.
a
Yeah,
house?
it's apartment complex. Yeah, it's apartment complex.
So we're talking about many levels?
Many
Maybe,
levels. Yeah, many
yeah.
levels. I believe it's around. I think it's 10 levels probably. Maybe 5 levels, but at least it's at least five levels. Yeah.
And my understanding of this case is that there is a knock at the door, or some attention to the door, and they notice, I guess maybe through a peephole, that there's a man, an unknown stranger dressed in black, with a black coat. He has a mustache. Does he have a hat too?
I think so. I think they usually they always have had. But the interesting thing about this kind of things. So usually when we talk about Men in Black phenomena, let's say in Western countries, in the United States, people usually say like Men in Black is more like well, people try to say what it's some kind of paranormal phenomena as itself, like this Man in Black is some kind of aliens or some kind of other kind of thing like this. But in Soviet scenario, in Soviet thing, let's say like this, people view these Men in Black as regular people. They dress like a regular KGB agents or some kind of agents, or even some kind of just a regular office working man, Soviet man. So they don't have any specific look usually, because there is some Men in Black cases, Soviet cases, which involves unusual look of these people, of these Men in Black persons. So, but they usually just look always just regular. So and here we coming back to idea what poltergeist is driven by some human technologies. So Soviet and Russian researchers, they usually treat this Men in Black activity, they usually treat it as a point for the government conspiracy or some kind of other human conspiracy, like what it's some kind of psychotronic weapon used against civilians. So that's the idea of many Soviet researchers and investigators, and they see these phenomena as part of the they see this Men in Black phenomena as part of the point. So that's what I wanted to say.
So basically, this figure, this unknown person, a man, Man in Black, comes to the door, and I guess is knocking at the door. Is that correct? And he has a briefcase, a small briefcase, and then things start to get strange.
They are, and after his visit, things started to get strange. The classic poltergeist basically began.
But they don't open the door.
They're not.
Yeah.
They don't open it, but it's still one of the usual parts of poltergeist is when someone approaches the door, and some knocks on the door. Sometimes people can see someone, sometimes they don't. And in either way, if they open the door or if they not open it, the poltergeist begins. And let's get to the team of investigators. This is quite a remarkable team. So it was the case I mentioned earlier in our discussion. It's the case what was investigated first by Ziegel, Felix Ziegel. He's from the right, and from the left we have Valentin Fomenko, as I mentioned him earlier, and Igor Vinokurov. And all three of them, they all investigated this case together. And it was basically the first, let's say, classic parapsychology poltergeist case investigation in the Western terms. I mean, you know, it was kind of like the first conducted research of the poltergeist activity, you know, like the meaning of it and treating it as a paranormal phenomena we know. So three of them, they wrote a report on this case, and this report eventually was one of the main points for the Fomenko. Fomenko from the 1982, Fomenko got really involved in poltergeist investigations and the research of this topic and parapsychology, but because before 1992 he was mostly involved in ufology. And starting from 1982, he started to get more in parapsychology and poltergeist investigations. And eventually, that was the point for Fomenko to start working on his big idea, his big theory, which we're gonna discuss later. He had an idea for explanation why all paranormal phenomena happens. His idea, his hypothesis, it was explaining all the paranormal. So simply saying, he had an idea of the some kind of alien mind which lives inside the earth and conducts all these kinds of phenomena, all these paranormal phenomena around the world. That was his main.
For what purpose, though?
For the purpose of research of the human psyche, of the human abilities, let's say, of the human reactions. They were trying to the idea behind his hypothesis was what this alien, it's human reactions, human emotions, human psychology, and everything else. So it was kind of like a huge test for humanity, huge research of humanity, let's say like this, by this alien. That was his idea. And what all these phenomena, all kinds of he was explaining everything that this idea. That was the point. He was explaining everything called the paranormal, that this, including all kinds of religious phenomena. Yeah, that's it.
And
And
this case, he considered that this case supported that idea.
Yeah. He was thinking what this case also he was thinking what this case also is
Helped make the case for his and the point for his theory. Well, why don't we? We can come back to that theory, which is very interesting. Why don't we continue though with this sequence of what happened? The audience doesn't know what happened after the man in black appeared. So could you continue from that point? What happened? Give some of the details.
They had a series of all kinds of phenomena. They had a series of all kinds of activity involving flying objects and involving, I believe, this man in black, this type of this person, this man in black phenomena. It appeared not once but several times eventually.
But then but now, okay, but let's just stay at the door for a moment, because the weird phenomena started with the door. I mean, after the man appeared, then I understand there was the door was shaking and all kinds of effects were happening with the door first.
Yeah,
right?
One of the interesting phenomena is some of them, even when they touched the door, some of the people who were living there even got shocked with electricity, like electrical shock. Then they tried to touch it. So the door was heavily involved in this case. It was shaking, and it was all kinds of sounds coming from there. But eventually, I would say what it was happening. Yeah, it was some kind of activity.
And then they started to hear, it sounded like somebody was sawing the door, using a hacksaw on the door.
Yeah, they had it, but they never been able to to face this to face this
to see it happening,
to see how it's going on. Yeah.
Now, excuse me, did the door have a hole in it so they could see out?
It is. They can. Yeah, they can.
And they look in the hole, and they don't see anybody outside, but yet they hear these sounds, and it sounds like somebody is sawing the door. Right? Is that the idea?
That's the idea, but
and there's nobody there.
A couple times they saw this man in black figure. Couple times they saw this man in black figure. Couple times. But and there was, again, as in most poltergeist cases at that time, there was a police involvement, and the police they've been they wasn't so heavily involved in this case as in previous one. The same is other authorities never appeared in there. Besides, of course, the research group, the investigation group. But the most interesting thing is it was one of the most heavily detailed, heavily documented case. What was documented by Fomenko, and his team, his colleagues, especially the first days of this poltergeist case, because usually it's not so easy to do. Usually the activity stops, then the researcher appears, or it happens the way it's the most complicated to document. But this one, it was documented pretty good, good enough, and some of the details eventually was published by son of Fomenko, some of the details, and earlier some of the details were published in a book by Vinokurov, and in some other articles by the people who were investigating it.
Now the residents in the apartment did not know the man that came to the door, did they?
No, nobody recognized him.
And
Nobody recognized him.
what do we know about the family? Were they have any importance in society at that time? Were they or just ordinary people, or who are these people in this apartment? Do we know?
Usually just some regular people, and in this case, it's not exception. Let's say, this area of Moscow at the time where they lived, it was it's kind of like how to say it, it was relatively it was kind of a new house, kind of. So I think it was they probably was the first family who were living there in this apartments. I believe so. So yeah, it was it's very rare when poltergeist appeared at some let's say kind of important people. It's usually just a regular people who it appears at, like a factory workers, some teachers, or some other things. But if we look at the modern times, for my luck, we was able to investigate a poltergeist case in 2016, where women had this woman, she had quite an important job, apparently, and they had quite a good apartments, but it's completely different story. But it was like a big exception, because example at my investigations at my practice of paranormal research, it was basically just a couple times when we had something like this, when we had like some kind of important people who deals with the poltergeist.
Now this, this incident took place on began on November 28th, 1982.
Yeah.
And with the doorbell ringing, it was 10:30 to 10:45. And they, without opening the door, they look through the peephole. There's no answer. And then they see it's described as a short man with a black mustache, black hat, and a black coat with a suitcase.
Yeah.
And they're viewing this through the keyhole, through the peephole. And he goes to the right of the door, and then he's gone. And then the different parts of the door start to move. The tongue of the overhead lock of the front door suddenly began to move and click on its own. But nobody was visible through the peephole in the front of the door. The door twitches as if it was strongly pushed and pulled by handle, but there's no one there. And there's strong knocks on the door. And then it just kind of escalates from there. It gets more and more bizarre and alarming. And at one point, there is an object that appears in the keyhole. It's described as a shiny spire with a diameter of about 5 millimeters, and it's slipped in for several seconds. So I guess some foreign object in the keyhole, I guess. And then at 11:30, they notice through the peephole the man in black has again approached the door. Yes. And then they start to hear the sounds of the sawing of wood from the door. And they see him, he opened the suitcase and took something from it. This is what they're observing. And then they're hearing the hacksaw. The man in black wrapped his hand in newspaper and left. And they imagine that maybe he cut his hand. And then the sound anomaly stopped. Anyway, why don't you take it from there? This situation keeps on growing and growing.
Yeah, that was going on. They did find some blood there, but the problem is they did had this observation. They saw this person, but eventually it only leads us to the conspiracy theory about some kind of people who acts who use some kind of technology to do these things, because in both cases we have some kind of person, and the person we're dealing with in this case, we don't know it. We don't know this person at all, and we can't really make any suggestions of who was it on what was it doing. At example, in previous case, we can actually try to understand, the person who they're trying to blame on this activity. But what I can suggest, maybe if even if we use an idea of Fomenko, that the alien involved did some tests and experiments on the human psychology. Maybe this I don't know, this alien, maybe this power, the power he possesses, maybe he can produce this kind of pictures, this kind of images for people to think what it's actually some kind of person, or maybe it's even can materialize, in reality, to do this kind of things. So they do have this kind of phenomena in this case and some other cases, the Men in Black, but it's mostly in a Men in Black phenomena category, and we can look at this separately, like we can look at this phenomena of Men in Black person, we can look at it separately, we can analyze it separately, and we can analyze separately the poltergeist activity as example. So that what was done by Fomenko and the crew. They've been analyzing how these objects inside the apartments, how these objects, how they fly, how they move, the speed, the angle, and everything else. We're talking about, like chairs, we're talking about some furniture, we're talking about some small objects and other things. So that was the main look. That was the main thing what they've been trying to investigate, exactly the mechanics, if you say something like this, and this Men in Black activity. Well, the researchers, the investigators of this case, they will kind of thinking what they can blame this person in terms of the poltergeist induction. I don't remember if this thing appears in Western parapsychology with example when you have like an object from the poltergeist case, and you bring this object to other apartments, to some home, to some other place, and poltergeist activity starts to begin at this place where you bring these objects. And Fomenko and his colleagues, they think in these terms, they think what maybe this person came to the door and did this stick you mentioned earlier. He just, somehow managed to infect this apartment, the poltergeist activity. That was one of the ideas they share in the report.
And what do you think about that idea?
Again, if we talk about previous case, at example, Vasily Kosinov, he when we was talking with him, he and in his book, you can find it in his book. If people interested, it's only in Russian, so and it's very rare book, so it's even hard to find in Russian. The original publication, I mean. In his book, he mentions what he brought some objects from some poltergeist cases which he was investigating, and some kind of poltergeist activity was happening at his house, at Vasily Kosinov house in Kursk. But it's just an example, because we spoke about Kursk not so long time ago. There was many of different other examples of this kind of activity. An example I remember, I believe it also could be called a poltergeist induction at some point, or maybe some kind of psychokinesis induction. I don't know.
Yeah, well, there's.
I mean, there's many cases, like I remember. Maybe you remember this kind of cases where some American ufologists bring in some things to their apartments, and they have some kind of poltergeist activity at their houses. And I remember there was this case in ufology where a guy took a picture of UFO or something else. I don't remember exactly, and the poltergeist activity began at his apartments. I think you know better about this kind of things. But poltergeist induction in common, many of researchers, of Soviet researchers, had some experience with it. But personally, me or my colleagues, we never experienced it. Like in modern times, in times, starting from the early 2000s and till these times, nobody of us, we never experienced anything like this. But Soviet researchers, they do mention it sometimes. And some researchers in the 90s, some people who I know, they also talk about this kind of phenomena. But in my practice, it never appears.
Well, the information I'm looking at says that the man in black, that what their hypothesis is that the suitcase contained an unidentified small object, quote, infected with a poltergeist, and a metal work tool with which the man in black either attached this object to the Savinykh's front door or infected the front door through close contact with the infected object. It is possible that the shiny metal spire, which poked through the keyhole, was thus the infected object. So continuing from there, all kinds of activity, objects were flying. Just about everything that could fly through the air or move was involved in this case. It's just the quantity of things that were observed to manifest some kind of a poltergeist effect was enormous in this case, just about everything. And also some of the residents were hit by an invisible fist on the shoulder from the back. And this is kind of hard to believe that so many objects could have moved in this apartment. Just about everything was affected.
A lot of it's not it's not like so the idea of poltergeist infection or poltergeist induction, as they call it in their papers sometimes, it's more of idea what you can bring on this some small object, for some small infected object, you can bring it in this place, and it starts to produce this kind of field. I don't know. That's just I'm trying to explain the idea. Like everything in this field is infected. That's the idea. So that's at least how I understand it.
So,
So it's not.
yeah, it's hard
not really. If you look at some other cases, some other poltergeist cases, they always there's some poltergeist cases is less active, some poltergeist cases is more active, and these more active poltergeist cases, they always involve a lot of movements, a lot of objects manipulations.
what do you think is the most impressive effects that were in this apartment? I mean, there was so much, it's hard to believe that so many things could have moved. Just everything was moving at different times.
I mean, yeah, but if you ask what I find the most fascinating in all this case, I would say that's an interesting question. It is have many details in it. It's many details in this case, and there's many things happened, and a lot of cases is kind of similar at the same time. So almost so many poltergeist cases is as interesting as this one. But yeah, this one did manage to damage these apartments and these people a lot.
Now, what did these people move out of the apartment as a result, or do we know?
As a result, I think it just ended in 1983. At some point, it just ended. So it wasn't very long. Like what we noticed in the poltergeist research and the research of the history of poltergeist. These older cases, they used to end earlier. They wasn't last for so long. Like they usually last for half a year or year. And right now, just in Russia, we had the cases what last for 3 years. There's even some cases what last for 7, for 8, for 10 years, like several cases for the last decade. We had several cases what last for many years, and these older cases they not so long. So people they moved out from their apartments, and in this case as well, as far as I know, they didn't move from there. They stayed.
And so one speculation is that the man in black could have had technology of some kind in his briefcase. But then if you think about it, okay, let's imagine for a moment, maybe that, think about that theory for a moment. Okay, he has some kind of weird technology weapon in his briefcase. Why wouldn't this technology, why would it be so selective? It was only affecting objects in the room. Like, for example, why wouldn't this if such a technology or weapon existed as an experiment, why wouldn't the wallpaper have been torn off the walls, or the clothing the people were wearing, or do you see what I'm saying? How
I
could
see.
it have been that
I
selective?
understand. I understand you, but well, maybe from this point of view, logically would be not to like to have a regulated stress situation. So we have like a stress situation here, and this situation is kind of, you need to manage it very closely, so it wouldn't be too extreme for people. You know what I'm saying? So every poltergeist have a like a graphic. Let's say you have like your the least activity, and it grows to some peak, and then it starts to slow down. The activity starts to slow down until eventually it's not stops fully. And that's the same story we deal in the longer cases. Like when we have like 10 years cases, they just stretch this limit. They just stretch this story, and it's basically the same. And some cases do have what you're saying. Some cases do involve what you describing, like the clothes goes off and the wallpapers and everything else. Some cases do have some things like this, but most of the cases, I haven't heard of these kind of things. In most of the cases, it's more of an exception when the clothes involved and the wallpapers involved. But they do use wallpapers. These poltergeists, they do use these wallpapers as a to write some kind of letters. If like depends either you look at poltergeist as a fake, or either you look at it as a actual phenomena. In both of these situations, we still deal with some kind of phenomena. Some kind of phenomena I'm talking about, in this case, I will say what we, from my point of view, from the point of view of my group and my colleagues, we just collect the data. We don't try to blame people. We don't try to act like a court, or police. We're here just to research it, to investigate it, and to collect data so we can make some analysis of all these things.
And what is your conclusion about this case? Do you think it's authentic paranormal activity?
I want to answer the question you asked earlier about what I found the most fascinating in this case. I think again, it's a Men in Black phenomena in this case. Like involvement of these Men in Black phenomena in this case, and the other things. I think it's what was the question again? The last question was.
Well, what is your conclusion? Do you think it is a authentic
I
paranormal case?
I think what this is an actual case. I think this one is authentic, the same as the previous case. Well, in my personal opinion, is what is authentic is an actual something unusual, some very weird activities. In either way, in both way, the previous case and this case, both of them are not how you say, they are both, you can't blame the people who live there. That's the both times I can say it for sure. So in both times you can't blame the people who live there, the witnesses. So I don't think what it's they blame, what they fault. I'm not saying what it's paranormal, you know, I'm not saying what it's something supernatural. In either of cases, maybe it's actually some kind of technology someone was testing out, or maybe it was something else. But in both cases, I don't think it was the fault or the blame of these people who lived there. In both of the cases, that's my opinion. But what was it actually paranormal? That's the question I can't answer. Was it actually something supernatural? That's the question I can't answer.
Have you come across other USSR poltergeist cases that also involved the man in black?
Yeah, I did. I did
Really?
find some cases involved the man in black phenomenon, and not just in Moscow, in different cities, in different regions.
And then the poltergeist activity appeared in these cases?
Yeah. The poltergeist activity and everything else.
Very strange.
But it's very rare. It's very rare. That's what I got to say. It's very rare phenomenon. So there's just several times when we actually have it, but it's not so rare compared to, let's say, American poltergeists or British poltergeists, because in Soviet poltergeists, you can meet something like this more often when you compare to international cases. But again, if you take like the whole list of Soviet cases, of Russian cases, it remains kind of rare.
Well, thanks for sharing that. Is there anything else to say before we move on to the next case?
Yeah, I think the same as in the previous case. It's both of these cases, they important in terms of history of paranormal research. So I'm mostly interested what in first case what we was talking about in first case, it's a KGB involvement and police involvement, and people know about it, and everybody knows about it, and it's officially mentioned what they were involved in there, what they were investigating. And this is the important thing for us. And in this case, the important part is what it was actually like the first like teaming up of investigators. It was like the first time when the whole team of high qualified researchers of unusual phenomena teamed up in Soviet Union to investigate something like this. That's the most interesting for me in this story. Not the whole content of what was happening in this apartment, because we have a lot of many poltergeists, not similar from the point of Men in Black. You know, like Men in Black, as I said, it's not, it's quite rare for poltergeist activity, but in terms of all these flying objects and all these phenomena, what was going on in there, that's not something unique. In terms of the poltergeist, of course, in terms of the in terms of the real life, in terms of the usual life, it's obviously very unusual and very. But if you look from the point of common poltergeist research and parapsychology research, you can find many cases close to this in all of the countries, all over the world. Yeah.
Well,
We will move next to another case.
okay.
Okay.
This is in 1990,
Yes.
and
It is.
I'll let you do the pronunciation.
Mm-hmm.
Poltergeist on
Samotechnaya.
Samotushin. Okay, tell us about this.
Samotechnaya.
Samatushna.
Yes, Samotechnaya. So it was a poltergeist on. It was a poltergeist on the street Samotechnaya in Moscow. So it was happening in a place, in a house of Saltykovy family. And this poltergeist case, it was quite big for Moscow at that time, and it was investigated by another person who I personally know, by Anatoliy Kartashkin, who I mentioned earlier today. He was investigating this case. He was basically the main investigator, together with Fomenko, and I believe with the Vinokurov as well. So the team who was involved in investigation of the previous case, what we discussed, it was also they was also involved in this case. And and eventually he wrote a book, as I told earlier, about this case. Oh, not about this case, but about his practice of poltergeist research in Russia in the Soviet times. And about this case specifically, he wrote several articles about it, about this case. So this case, the how do you say the journalists from one of the magazines Kartashkin was working with, they told him about this case. They told him about this activity in this apartment. It was already the very end of the Soviet times, so they was allowed to talk about these things. They was allowed to investigate these things publicly. He was basically he was a teacher at Moscow Aviation Institute, as well as a Ziegel. So I believe he knew Ziegel. I don't remember it for sure, but I believe he knew Ziegel. But we should remember what Ziegel died in 1986. But eventually, yeah. Eventually they he and Fomenko, they was investigating this case. What was involved in this, it was mostly, all kinds of destructive activity, kind of the same as in previous cases. In previous case we discussed, but this one was there's like a couple of pictures Kartashkin Kartashkin was able to take. I will show it to you. I will show you the other. I will give me a second. I will show this picture. Here's the picture. Yeah, it shows right now. The picture, you can see the broken, this hole appeared in the mirror. And this is behind the one who takes the picture is the famous journalist in Russia, in Soviet Union as well. It's Viktor Akhlomov. He was also involved in investigation, and he was making some articles as well, I believe, in his newspapers where he worked. And this is already Kartashkin himself making a picture of another mirror, what was broken in this apartment. It's two different mirrors, as you can see. So this one is just a separate mirror, and this mirror is inside of a closet. And this is Kartashkin and the police officer who was one of the witnesses of the poltergeist. And I should mention what Kartashkin, he also managed to take a look at the activity of this poltergeist and some activity, what was going on near the apartments in the house. So it's again it's a multi-apartment complex, as you said. It's the same as in the previous case. And at example, this is also another picture from this case. You can see here broken glass on the floor. So it's a glass from the window, but broken because of the activity of the poltergeist. And here you can see Kartashkin himself and people, these two women, they in charge of this household, they kind of like the local administration. Yeah, and here you can see some people, and here you can see the mirror, what was previously in the pictures. And back in the days, they've been heavily involved in the dowsing, the people who were interested in paranormal activity and paranormal research in Russia and Soviet Union. They were very much interested in dowsing, and they were using it actively on poltergeist cases as well. Here's some researchers, some team did dowsing method. It's yeah, that's it. That's all the pictures for this case.
And what are some of the details of what happened in the case, though, with the phenomena? Here's something. There was it actually got pretty extreme. There was at one point a rolling pin that was beating some of the people, and this rolling pin glowed and sparks jumped from the blows, it says. And then there was also an incident. There was wasn't there a sofa that seemed to have micro lightning effects?
Yeah. These kind of lightnings and some kind of other kind of phenomena, they do happen sometimes on the poltergeists, and it also not very often, but this is one of the cases. But this case involves also the very interesting thing. Like one day, one of the people who lived there they took the clock watch. I'm showing it right now on the pictures.
Mhm.
On the picture, they took the clock, and this person, he saw the guy who lives there. He saw what the numbers on the clock they changed. So instead of so 12, number 12 and number 6, they changed places with each other. It was like a short time phenomena, but he wasn't the only one who saw it, as far as I know. And later they changed back. Later they changed back to the regular, to the regular state.
Hmm.
That was this kind, like a reality manipulation, or maybe some kind of hallucination, or maybe some kind of common hallucination, something like this.
Was this an electric clock?
No, I was showing it. It was it's just a regular small clock,
And wind
like
up clock?
yeah, like like the
Totally mechanical.
totally mechanical, yeah.
Hmm.
Totally mechanical, yeah.
So I'm still confused. The sequence of the numbers changed.
Yeah. Numbers changed the place, basically. On the place of the number 12, the number 6 appeared, and on the number 6, the 12 appeared.
Hmm. And in this case, the fire department was involved, the police were involved.
Yeah, many people was involved. Yeah, and police officers even were witnesses of some of the activity.
And probably the most extreme, though, was the people getting hit by a rolling pin. A number of people were struck. And
Yeah, but the thing what was Kartashkin personally observed, the thing what Kartashkin personally see, he saw how the like a battery, like a accumulator. Do I say it right?
give me a little bit more information. I'm not sure.
I will, give me a second. So battery, yeah,
Battery.
yeah. So battery or accumulator. You understood me? You
Not
understand me?
exactly. Cameletter? What is that?
Battery.
Okay,
You know, like,
battery.
yeah, battery,
Yeah.
like the
Yeah, I
one you use
understand
to
battery.
power something. Yeah.
Yeah.
So he saw how the battery flight near him. That was one of the things he saw. How it flight near him. One of the things.
Now here's the part where it talks about the sofa. Let me read just this little part here. The sofa glowed calmly and evenly. There were small micro lightnings that streamed over the surface. He ran his fingers. A brighter trace remained on the sofa, and his fingers were neither prickly or ticklish, nothing. So it sounds like he didn't feel anything, but he saw these visual effects on the sofa of micro lightnings.
There
that's
was
kind of bizarre.
there was a similar case back in the 80s. They had a similar case in Siberia. They had a case where small ball lightnings were flying around apartments. They were flying from under the sofa. Also, I think I may not remember it as good. But it is, yeah. It's there's some, again, the same as with the Men in Black phenomena. It's not very often, but sometimes sometimes people mention this kind of activity.
And well, that's another. All of these three cases are very mystifying, and we still don't know to this day what really happened.
Yeah, well, I can say what this, as example, these first two cases, I'm pretty sure in them. You know, I not really. I can't blame the people who were there, but in this last case, what we discussed, well, Kartashkin himself, he thinks what it's an actual real poltergeist. He thinks what it's an actual paranormal activity, but I would say what I could argue with him here, if I would have more details on this case, if I would be able to be there to talk to these people, because I just think what it's that there's too many things what happened without researchers, you know, like and the people who's involved in this case, they also are regular people, but it's some you know, it's not exactly usual case scenario. So it's some they have they have like a guy there. So they have this family, right? But if I remember right, I may mistaken, but they don't have you know, children there, because if we try to explain poltergeist, you know, at example from the point of psychokinesis, from the point of spontaneous psychokinesis, from William J. Roll idea, which I usually prefer. There's no source of psychokinesis in this story from this point of view. But also they have, let's say, some kind of a reason, you know, because in this point the Soviet Union starts to collapse. People don't know it yet, but it will collapse in one year from these events, from 1990, and they already have the press, they already allowed to write about this kind of things. So the popularity of poltergeist activity, of paranormal activity, of UFO phenomena, it rises tremendously.
I see.
And paranormal things all over the place. And I would say what there's a big possibility what people who was involved in this case. The people, the witnesses who called for help. There is a possibility. There is a slight possibility. I'm not saying what it exactly like this, but maybe they just wanted attention. Maybe they just wanted attention. They wanted to get, like in this new topic. They wanted to get in this new field. I'm just, I'm not trying to blame here anymore, but it's just my opinion. Maybe it is like this.
Well, I want to, thank you for sharing all these amazing cases and information. And I would like to, there's so much material. We need to do a series of shows with other cases and information. And yeah, I think we've really, it's been interesting to see what has happened in the past, and in the future, maybe we can get to some of your cases. Do you want to mention anything about a little bit more about what you've done personally?
I can mention
Just a little bit.
Yeah, first of all, I want to show the last pictures what I
Okay.
have. I have so this is a book of Fomenko. He later, not long time before he died, he was able to publish a book. I believe it was 2000 or 2002. He was able to publish a book, or maybe he already died at this point. I don't quite remember. I think in either way, it was the main job of his life. It was the main thing what he was working on. Here it is. It was the main thing he was working on, and his son later republished this book, but well, they've been able to publish it in quite a good publishing house, and it was quite a popular book for sometimes. And this another book is the book of the Anatoliy Kartashkin, who we talk about this last case. This book. This book was originally published in 1997, but later in 2019, we've been able to republish it with help of some of my friends, and because it became the original book was becoming quite rare, and I thought what we need to republish it, and
Excuse me, what is the title? In English, what would be the title?
In English, it would be Poltergeist, Frightening Reality. Yeah. And the book I mentioned, the Fomenko book, it actually called the Earth as We Don't Know It. And the publishing house added the big sign like aliens controls Earth for a long time, but the original name is Earth as We Don't Know It. They managed to keep both of the names on the book.
Nice.
And this book it's Igor Vinokurov's book. It's called Horror. So this book is basically he just tells about his research, the research what he conducted on the poltergeist phenomena, on some other phenomena like parapsychology phenomena and some other things. So it's a Novgorodov book. It's a poltergeist research in Siberia. This book was written, as I said earlier, in 1993, before the Kartashkin book, but only now it was managed to be published. Also, with my involvement in the process, I found the Novgorodov. I've been able to contact him with the help again of some of the friends of the colleagues, and eventually this book of Novgorodov, of Nikolai Novgorodov, was able to be published finally. Again, it's all in Russian. If it's interesting for you in Russian, if it's interesting for you in English, I can try to help if you contact with me. But yeah, and
how should people? How do you want
Mhm.
people to contact you?
Here it is. Do you see it, Peter?
Yes.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay.
Yeah.
And again, thank you, George. Thank you,
Thank you.
Felipe. Thank you, Pinay Studios. We'll see you next time. Very good.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.